What do you think the Maui locals think of the Maui plan? Yeah. I'm sorry, there aren't any more locals living there anymore. They all had to leave town. Do you think the people of the Palisades or Altadena are going to be consulted about how their areas are reimagined by Newsom and Bass? No. Absolutely.
This is a conspiracy.
No. It'll be more like the Chairman Maui plan.
They want to use you to get what they want and then throw you away.
Yeah. I mean, one of the most pathetic and despicable things I've seen was when Karen Bass, in order to shift the blame and culpability from herself, wiped it on the fire chief and threw her under the bus for speaking the truth about how the department had been defunded and were without resources. They didn't even have water. Now Gavin has asked for $40 billion of federal dollars to do whatever he has in mind. Why would we trust him with that kind of funding? See, along with that federal money should come a federal investigation into what the heck happened. You know, for a few pennies more. A federal investigation. I mean, Karen is, she's having an investigation into why she made the decision to go to Ghana. Which is absurdity on 4 legs.
Examination of conscience.
Federal investigation, yep. We should have one of those to see what the heck happened, and a further federal oversight to see what happens with any federal funding that we get, so that we have transparency, that it's audited. Not because he's doing it, but because anyone's doing it. Because hopefully he won't be there anymore. Amen to that. We need to see what's happening with our money, with our federal dollars. California deserves leadership that does more than acknowledge a problem. It deserves leaders who take real, meaningful steps towards addressing these threats to our community. You deserve better. Our firefighters deserve better. And above all, the people who've lost everything deserve better.
Yeah, right.
It's time for accountability. It's time for leadership that doesn't wait until it's too late.
Fair election.
And most of all, it's time for the government that stands with its people, not just in words.
Right. Right.
They got to go through the motions, you know, do something meaningful, build back better. Anyway, thank you. That's about all I have to say. I think it's enough. Should be enough to get me in trouble.
Now for governor! Now for governor! Now for governor!
I'd now like to introduce you to Randy Economy, who is going to talk to you all about the recall in general.
Righty, Randy.
Wow, what an amazing day. I'm Randy Economy, and I'm so blessed to be here today. I'm so blessed to be able to stand next to this iconic leader for our spiritual community.
Thanks for coming, Mel.
And I thank Mel Gibson from the absolute bottom of my heart. I'm so appreciative of this man.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for being here this great morning here at USDA in Washington, D.C. I especially want to thank my colleagues from the administration, Secretary Pete Hegseth, Attorney General Pam Bondi, Secretary Kristi Noem, Counselor to the President Peter Navarro, the incredible governors who joined us today from Arkansas and from Tennessee and from Nebraska, whom you'll hear from. Amazing members of Congress that are here with us. You'll get to hear from Senator Tuberville, Senator Marshall, and Congressman G.T. Thompson. We also have leaders with us here in the audience from Alabama, from Arkansas, from Florida, Kansas, Nebraska, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Texas, and West Virginia, who have joined us for this historic rollout to address one of the most significant national security threats facing our nation. But first, I want to say that we gather together at a moment when the power of nature is rendered especially vivid to us. The floods in my native Texas, which have carried away so many lives, many of whom my family knew has caused so much heartbreak and brought so many tears. It touches every one of us, not just those of us from the Lone Star State, but every American who cares about their neighbor, and especially every parent whose heart reposes not within themselves, but within their own children. It is not within our power to ease their pain, nor should those most devastating losses be erased or eased. But what we can do is grieve alongside them, and I know that's what we are all doing. And we can also join them in a sorrow that honors the joy of their children's and their family members' lives. It is not and has never been God's purpose that we suffer, but it is within His design that we rely upon His creation. We see that in extraordinary natural tragedy, as over the last few days, but we also see it in the beneficial fruits of His creation, the bounty of the land, the yield of our farms, the produce and the product of our labor. That dependency upon His goodness is part of His purpose, and so as stewards of creation, we have an obligation to protect it. In protecting it, we protect ourselves, and that's why we're here today. Nowhere is this illuminated more vividly than in the stewardship and conservation of our American farmlands. We're here to talk about that today, and we're here to address one particular facet of that stewardship, responding to one particular type of threat. The plain reality is that American agriculture in American hands is a positive good, a rich blessing that we carefully tend and upon which rests the sustenance and future of our republic. Every family, every home, every community depends upon what our farmers do, and they support and sustain us, not merely by keeping us materially fed, but by keeping us spiritually strong. The farm's produce is not just a commodity, it is a way of life that underpins America itself. And that's exactly why it is under threat from criminals, from political adversaries, and from hostile regimes that understand our way of life as a profound and existential threat to themselves. For them, agricultural lands and our farms, because they are a previous inheritance, are weapons to be turned against us. We see it again and again, from Chinese communist acquisition of American farmland to criminal exploitation of our system of agriculture to the theft of operational information required to work the land and beyond. All of this takes what is profoundly good and turns it towards evil purposes. But November 2024 signaled it's time for our federal government to wake up and step up, and that's exactly what we are doing under the leadership of President Donald Trump. With this announcement today, we are taking this purpose and our American farmland back. American agriculture is not just about feeding our families, but about protecting our nation and standing up to foreign adversaries who are buying our farmland, stealing our research, and creating dangerous vulnerabilities in the very systems that sustain us. Reshoring and nearshoring our food and agriculture supply chain is essential for our nation's security. In coordination with the White House, the Departments of Treasury, Defense, Homeland Security, and Justice, as well as state governors, state agriculture commissioners, local, tribal, and territorial governments, today we announced the USDA's National Farm Security Action Plan. This plan includes 7 key action items, and there's a lot of people here that I want you to hear from, so I'm not going to go one by one, but just very quickly. It's on our website. The press has gotten a preview of it, and we can ask some questions once we finish the main program. But very quickly, and perhaps the most important, the first of the 7, is securing and protecting American farmland ownership. Actively engaging at every level of government to take swift legislative and executive action to ban the purchase of American farmland by Chinese nationals and other foreign adversaries. Standing on the shoulders of great governors, 3 of whom are standing behind me, who have already been leading the way on this issue. And at the federal government level, working to do everything within our ability, including presidential authorities, to claw back what has already been purchased by China and other foreign adversaries. Additionally, working with the Treasury of the Secretary of the Treasury, along with our Defense Department, on memorandums to ensure that moving forward, there is a much more intentional look at who is buying what in this country and from where they are in the world. Also enhancing our agricultural supply chain resilience, also protecting our U.S. nutrition safety net from fraud and foreign exploitation. Number 4, defending agricultural research and innovation. No more sweetheart deals and secret pacts with countries that do not have our best interests in mind. Number 5, making sure that America First is in every USDA program, from farm loans to food safety. We have already canceled 7 active agreements with entities in foreign countries of concern and will continue to cancel additional agreements moving forward. I signed a memo today, thank you, which immediately removes 70 citizens from countries of concerns that currently are affiliated with the USDA through contracts or research arrangements. And we are working to issue regulatory action to remove over 550 entities from foreign countries of concern from our preferred catalog. Number 6, safeguarding plant and animal health, working to make sure that we know what is coming in and how to control animal diseases. And number 7, protecting critical infrastructure from our farms and our food and our supply chains, again, along with so many partners across this government here in Washington and across our states. Now, please help me welcome to the podium the amazing Secretary Pete Hegseth. Thank you all.
Well, Brooke, thank you so much for your incredible leadership on this issue. It's an honor to be here. It's a very important one. I think we're all here for 2 basic reasons. One, under President Trump's leadership, we're going to put America first. We have America, American land, American basing, American troops, American citizens. You have a Secretary of Homeland Security who cares about Homeland Security. You have an attorney, imagine that. You have an Attorney General that cares about justice. You have a Secretary of the Agriculture that cares about our farmland and our farmers. You have governors who've led the way, and senators and congressmen who now have reinforcements from an America First movement. That it's about America First, but it's also just the application of common sense. As someone who's charged with leading the Defense Department, I want to know who owns the land around our bases and strategic bases, and getting an understanding of why foreign entities, foreign companies, foreign individuals might be buying up land around those bases. That's something I should be paying attention to on behalf of the American people, on behalf of my department, and on behalf of the President. It's common sense. And so food security, just like energy resilience, just like where we get our water, that's all national security, especially in a contingency. So we would be asleep at the wheel if we were not fully a party to an effort like this to ensure that our nation had the food supply it needs. But specifically, our troops have what they need on our bases, so that in those moments you can rely on us here in the United States to provide that security. So no longer can foreign adversaries assume we're not watching and we're not paying attention and we're not doing something about it, because we are. So, Brooke, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Please help me welcome to the podium to speak of the agro-terrorism threats our incredible Attorney General Pam Bondi.
Thank you all, and we know Texas is your home state, Secretary Rollins. Our hearts go out to all those in Texas and the families, as well as in North Carolina, who are also experiencing those horrible floods. We're so happy to be here today to protect our farmers, our ranchers, and our ag community. Under President Trump, we are proudly putting our farmers first again. Thank you to our Congress, our governors, all of the great people who have gathered here today. My job is to make America safe again, which includes protecting our farmers who feed our families. The Department of Justice will use every tool at our disposal to secure, defend, and protect our ag community from threats. Our Environmental and Natural Resources Division has successfully defended the Forest Service as it manages our forest. We're also defending mining critical and strategic minerals, which is very important to our nation's security. We're cracking down on pesticide trafficking. And we are doing this by closing the southern border, working hand in hand with our great Kristi Noem, where illegal and highly toxic chemicals from Mexico were smuggled into the U.S., and the Department of Justice is prioritizing the arrest of those illegal aliens doing it. Additionally, our National Security Division is actively monitoring foreign threats to American agriculture. Last month in Michigan, this is very frightening, we charged 2 Chinese nationals for attempting to smuggle potential agro-terrorism weapons into the United States. Both of them have ties to the CCP. Just days later, we arrested another Chinese citizen for sending packages of concealed biological materials into the United States. It's going to stop. FBI has opened over 100 bio-smuggling investigations in recent years. We will prosecute you. We will hold you accountable. Thank you to everyone who is here today, especially Secretary Rollins, Secretary Hegseth, all of our good friends governors, my good friend Governor Huckabee, and we will, all of us, will never back down from supporting our American farmers. God bless you, and God bless America.
Next, the incredible Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, everyone.
Well, good morning, and I am so blessed and pleased to be here with Brooke, who is a dear friend of mine, and our hearts and prayers still continue to go out with Texas, and I'll be back down there in a few days to spend more time with them and to help them continue to heal and with recovery efforts. The one thing I wanted to share with all of you today is that long before I had the honor of serving as President Trump's Homeland Security Secretary, I was a farmer. I was a rancher. In fact, I've worked on food policy for over 30 years. And I recognize that food policy is national security policy. A country who cannot feed itself, cannot take care of itself, and cannot provide for itself is not secure. And that we have to be able to feed ourselves to make sure that no other country ever controls us. And I've watched for decades as evil foreign governments, including China, have come into this country and they've stolen our intellectual property. They've manipulated their currency. They've treated us unfairly in trade deals. They've come in and purchased up our processing companies, stolen our genetics. In fact, I've worked in this building off and on commissions and projects and laws and different statutes to ensure that China did not completely take control of our entire food supply chain, recognizing that the United States of America would be in jeopardy if that ever were to happen. I've watched them come in and establish a presence in stealing our chemicals, in providing our fertilizer for us. And so 2 years ago, when I served as governor of South Dakota, we passed a law in our state that said China and 6 other foreign evil governments would never own our farmland. And I'm very proud to say that in South Dakota, China does not own any of our land, nor will they ever own any of our land. While I served in Congress, I worked hard to put in programs that would help manage risk for farmers. I tell people all the time, farmers are the biggest gamblers that I know. They go to a bank oftentimes and they have to borrow money to buy land. Then they go back to the bank and they need machinery to work that land, and so they borrow some more money to do that. Then they have to go back and get an operating note to purchase seed and fertilizer or chemical potentially. And they put it in the dirt and they hope that months later it'll rain, the sun will shine, and that there'll be something there that they can pick up, that they can sell, and then that the markets that are beyond their control, that there will be a price there that will help them cash flow so they can go back and do it all over again the next year. They do that so that they can feed this country, so that they can feed this world. In fact, growing up as a little girl and as a daughter of a farmer and a rancher, I always felt like God loved farmers more. I mean, if you look at the Bible, look at Scripture, and you look over and over again, he talks about sowing and reaping and cattle on 1,000 hills and your barns to overflowing. And so I feel like there's a special blessing on farmers. And the fact that we have a president and that we have a Secretary of Agriculture that recognizes the importance of food policy and what it means to this country's security is so wonderful. It's such a change from what the previous administration and how they prioritized our farmers and ranchers. So now as the Secretary Now, as the Secretary of Homeland Security, I have responsibilities when it comes to securing our homeland. But many of those responsibilities have to do with securing our critical infrastructure. We have the responsibility for 10 of our 16 critical infrastructures, which means our electrical grid, our water supply chain, how we protect and run this country, and what we do to make sure the people here are safe, but not just the people, the products and goods that come in and out of this country. Our Customs and Border Protection units are the ones that all of our goods come into this country and leave this country on, and their investigations and how they inspect our ag products are critically important to make sure that we aren't facing any kind of threats from what kind of products may come into this country or what kind of terrorist acts might happen from goods that other countries may wish to send to us that would harm our food supply. We will continue to make sure that we have the systems in place, the people in place, the experts in place, and the policies in place to make sure that this country always feeds itself, and that we always have the ability to grow our own food, and that we rely on no one else to feed the people of the United States of America, because it is a national security issue when a country cannot provide for itself. And we will never let any other country control our food supply or control our people, because we will always be the great United States of America. Thank you.
Yeah, I was reminded when Christy was Governor Nome and we were at America First Policy. Christy, you and I did an event together on this very issue 3 years ago, and she, along with some of the other governors, really stepped up. So thank you, Secretary Nome. Next, a longtime friend, a partner from the first Trump administration, and someone who has been leading on this for years and years. Please help me welcome White House Counselor Peter Navarro.
What a beautiful day to be out here, and it's difficult, I think, for a lot of Americans to wrap their head around what we're talking about today. We're such a good and kind nation that has done so much for the rest of the world over so many decades, including fighting 2 world wars on behalf of the rest of the world. But this is so serious an issue. The Art of War, a book, Sun Tzu, centuries old, says that the acme of warfare is to win without firing a shot. You fast forward to a book that was written by 2 high-ranking military officials in China called Unrestricted Warfare. And you understand that we are indeed in a new world where kinetic warfare is not the first choice of our rivals anymore. Rather, it is things like sending us seeds or trying to steal our seeds or trying to change the seeds. It is acquiring our supply chain in agriculture. It's setting up spy shops on land next to military bases. Do you remember when that balloon, it was just a weather station? We seem so naive about so much of this, when in fact we have nations and bad actors trying to do bad things using our supply chains now as weapons. The world changed yet again on April 2nd when the Chinese embargoed critical minerals, not just on us, but for the rest of the world. The Russians now embargo things like neon and helium and uranium as a tool. So we must be clear-eyed about the threats, and I just have to congratulate Secretary Rollins for taking leadership on an issue which has been troublesome for years. And we have governors here, like Kristi Noem in South Dakota, just leadership on that. She was doing that before anybody was paying attention. We're going to hear from Governor Huckabee. Arkansas has led the way on this issue at the state level, even as the federal government has been silent about it up to this point. The last thing is, big things like Smithfield Foods. I don't know if you know this, but this one really troubled me when it happened. But the Chinese bought Smithfield Foods and basically control about 1/8 of the world's pork supply now. And we worry, we've had food inflation. We worry when things happen that can be part of that. And then the other key purchase which we allowed them to do was Syngenta. Well, what is that? It's a seed company. And in a world of ever-changing pests and things like that, and climate differences about where water is and things like that, seeds really can be the revolution that keeps the world fed. And China now owns a key part of that. So what Secretary Rollins is doing today, it's a historic day. She's putting down the marker that the United States is no longer going to tolerate the attacks on our agricultural system, not just the land, but the supply chain as well. She deserves more than a hand. She deserves a helping hand here, and that's why the other aspects of our government are behind us as well. So I appreciate being here on this absolutely gorgeous day, and again, I commend the leadership of the people behind me. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Again, no one more of a warrior than he on these issues and many others, so thank you. Next, also from the first Trump administration now, the governor of the great state of Arkansas, who another leader in this area. Please help me welcome Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Good morning. It is incredible to be here and be joined with people who really understand what it means not just to love our country, but to be willing to do things that actually preserve, protect, and allow us to pass on what makes our country so great to the next generation. And that's exactly what you see in the collaboration of the people that are gathered behind me. I'm so proud of the fact that Arkansas was the first state in the country to kick a Chinese-owned company off of our farmland and out of our state, and we made them pay for it, very Trump-esque. And in the last couple of months, we've passed new legislation just this year allowing us to prohibit them from now not only owning farmland in our state, but from building or buying land around our military bases and critical infrastructure. It is something that has to happen and something that states have been leading the way on. But unfortunately, our states can't do it alone. That's why events like today matter so much. That's why leadership from people like Secretary Rollins matter so much. The fact that we now have a president who understands who our real enemies are and is willing to take them on is making a huge difference, not just in our country, but around the world. You know, we've talked a lot about today a country's ability to feed itself, but that's not the only place, and that's not the only role agriculture plays. A country has to be able to feed itself, fuel itself, and fight for itself to truly be free. And that's why what this group represents is every component of that, and we now have a president who understands it and is willing to do everything within his power to make sure the United States continues to be the greatest country on the face of the planet. And that doesn't happen by accident. That happens because we have great leadership. And I'm proud of the role that Arkansas has been able to play, but I'm more excited about the leadership that we now have in Washington that is going to take this to all 50 states and frankly all across the world. Having this group, there are no people I have greater confidence in. Secretary Hegseth leading the greatest military on the face of the planet, and nobody better suited to do so. He's tough, and I'm pretty sure he could take every member of the cabinet in an arm wrestling competition, but he's not the only tough one up here. There's no chance that China has going up against my friends Pam Bondi, Kristi Noem, and Brooke Rollins. They are not only the toughest women in Washington, They're some of the toughest people in all of America. And this group of people, under the leadership of President Trump, is not only going to protect our great country, but they're going to make sure that we have the ability to pass it on to the next generation behind us. I'm so grateful for their leadership, so thankful I get to be part of an effort that is going to make sure that the freedom of our country is protected and preserved for every single American to enjoy. Thank you for letting us be here, and thank you, Brooke, for putting this amazing event and this great plan together to help our country. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Governor Sanders. Also at the front of the battle, Governor Bill Lee of Tennessee. Please help me welcome him.
Thank you, Secretary Rollins. Let me just add my words of gratitude to President Trump and to his administration. And it's an honor to stand here with these great leaders. I have served as the governor originally in President Trump's first term, and then through the Biden administration, and now again in the Trump administration. During the years when President Trump was not in office, and governors like myself and Governor Sanders and Governor Pillen were working individually to secure our farmland. So in Tennessee, we have passed laws that prohibit ownership, that require divestment if found, that impose strict penalties for those foreign adversaries who take our property. We have also passed the Farmland Conservation Act in order to make it easier for the next generation of farmers to live and operate in our state. But that work was really hard in the previous Biden administration because we didn't have a partner who understood the threats and the challenges that we understand in Tennessee. So I'm so grateful for President Trump's leadership here, especially for Secretary Rollins' leadership, who she and I connected early on. My family is a multi-generational farming family as well. And I understand that when my grandfather was farming in Tennessee, the issues that we're talking about today didn't exist. But for my grandchildren who live on our family farm in Tennessee today, we understand that our farmland is not just dirt. It is our national security. It is our economic future. It is our children's heritage. And it is under threat. And the leaders here recognize that. And we've taken steps at the state level, but now, refreshingly, we have an administration and multiple cabinets who are coming together collaboratively with governors across the states and making sure that America's future is preserved for the next generations. Thank you.
Our first conversation, Governor Lee and mine, was not about how to save America. It was about our mutual love of Hereford cattle. So we are forever bonded. Listen, y'all, next, another great governor, great leader on this issue. Please help me welcome Governor Pillen of Nebraska.
Well, good morning, and just an incredible shout out to everybody in the cabinet and Brooke and her incredible leadership, and a great thank you for President Trump assembling what I view as extraordinary leaders across all of the cabinet to absolutely make America great in a special, special place. This is very, very touching for me to have the opportunity to be here. I'm the 41st governor of Nebraska. I'm the first governor that's made my living from agriculture in 100 years. I have simply sat and looked in my career of over 40 years and saying, what on earth is going on with China? I believe this. I believe in family farm security. I believe in food security, and that equates to national security. Nebraska is doing its fair share. I believe we need to do more than our fair share. So our first first year in 23, we were able to pass legislation that took all Chinese equipment off of all telecommunications across the state. That was the first step. Second step was making sure that no land is purchased by any foreign adversaries in the state of Nebraska. Third step is simply that we have direct conversations with companies that are from China. Peter Syngenta called me, wanted to come to the Capitol and have a meeting, and I said, I have no interest in having a meeting, have no interest in you being in Nebraska. My suggestion would be to leave. My suggestion would be to get a different job. I'm really, really proud to announce that Syngenta has sold their business in Nebraska to a family-owned genetic company from the United States. So we're really excited about that. I think that what is really, really important is I think back on 40 years of things that have gone on that has never made sense. It's really important that the leaders behind me, that we continue to have the courage and the wisdom to never back down and to stand up and protect our land and protect our families, because we all in agriculture risk. We talk about gambling, Christy, we all risk everything we have every single day to put food on the grocery stores. And then lastly, I'm really, really excited about Secretary Rollins and her understanding and work in terms of foreign animal disease, because that's another risk where adversaries could have a great impact. These are issues that are really, really important, and none of us can ever give up. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Now, Senator Tommy Tuberville from the great state of Alabama.
Damn, she didn't call me coach. I always look for a day like this when I was coaching. I'd work the hell out of them, and we'd line up down there in the parking lot and just run for about an hour, you know. Just think about it right now, though. Our farmers every day go out in this every morning and scratch the ground to try to make a living and try to feed all of us in this country. And they're very important. I'm on the Ag Committee, Armed Services Committee. I've seen it all. I'm not a politician. I've been on the front row and been able to watch the devastation of our farming community in the last 4 years under the Democrat, Socialist, Communist Biden party. It was devastating. Input cost high, $5 diesel. Instead of a $700,000 cotton picker, they're $1.5 million. They wanted to put our farmers under. We lost 150,000 farms and 25,000 farmers in the last few years. Folks, we are in trouble in ag, really trouble. And we just tried to help them with reference prices in the big, beautiful bill we just passed, but they're going to need a lot of help. They are scratching and clawing just to make a living. Thanks for Brooke putting this on. China is a threat. They're not a threat. They are dominating us in almost everything that they do, because we've set back and the politicians have been counting their money instead of doing what's right and helping this country stay in the front. We've got to be number one. We can't be number two. We've got to fight back. They are coming into our country and buying our farmland. In my state of Alabama alone, they own 2.2 million acres of farmland. That's right, in Alabama. Foreign adversaries. It's embarrassing of what we've done. Now, don't blame the farmers. The farmers have to make a living, and if they can't make a living, they have to sell their farmland. The Biden administration forced our farmers to sell their farmland by all the things they did to them. It's a disgrace. Brooke is going to bring that back. President Trump's going to bring that back. The one thing I'm trying to do is I'm trying to pass the Farm Act, Foreign Adversaries Act. What is that? We have a group in this country called CFIUS. CFIUS is a group of cabinet members that determine who buys what if it's a foreign sale. I mean, they all get together and they look at it, whether it's a steel company, whether it's farmland, whether it's some kind of business. That's what CFIUS does. And it's made up of high-ranking cabinet members in the White House. Who is not on there? The Secretary of Agriculture. What the hell are we doing? I mean, how far behind are we? We have to get the Secretary of Agriculture on CFIUS to protect our farmland. If we don't do it, we're going to continue to lose at the end of the day. So thanks for being here. In a few minutes, we'll line up down in this end zone, and we're going to start running this way until I get tired of watching. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Coach. Thank you so much. Next up, Senator Roger Marshall, then Chairman G.T. Thompson of the House will close it out, and then we'll answer a few questions. Please help me welcome Senator Roger Marshall.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. America's abundant food supply is not guaranteed. It's a strategic asset we must fiercely protect. Farm and ranch security is national security, and I'm proud today to share how Kansas is at the heart of this mission. Today, we tell China to get the hell out of American agriculture. Today, China, here's your ticket. Do not pass go. Get the hell out of American agriculture. And the Trump administration is going to lead the way. Now, I want to start by just thanking Secretary Rollins, and maybe we can help you get some Angus cattle someday for your farm. But I do want to thank Secretary Rollins and President Trump and his administration for his unwavering commitment to our farmers, our ranchers, and rural America. The big reconciliation bill we just passed exemplifies this support. It strengthened the farm safety net, including increased reference prices. It makes key business tax deductions permanent and doubles the estate tax exemption up to $30 million for couples and streamlines the 45Z tax credit. Folks, 45Z is going to do more for agriculture than all the soybeans and sorghum we sold to China in the past 5 years. This bill empowers our agriculture communities and secures our family farms for generations to come. Now, as a fifth-generation farm kid, I learned how agriculture underpins our economic stability, our public health, our national defense, our geopolitical autonomy, and our rural way of life. It contributes $1.5 trillion to GDP and supports over 22 million jobs, yet we often take it for granted. Our farmers, our ranches, our food supply chains face grave threats, specifically bioterrorism, procurement disruptions, and foreign ownerships. A virus like COVID, which was made in a lab, could target our beef and dairy cattle industry next, or a fungus could devastate our wheat and our corn. Whether it's from nature or made in a laboratory by a foreign adversary, these risks demand vigilance. Let me share how Kansas is leading the fight. We're proud to host the Animal Health Corridor that stretches from Columbia, Missouri to Manhattan, Kansas, the Little Apple, to Lincoln, Nebraska, where cutting-edge research thrives. And why in the world we let scientists from foreign adversaries in those experiments and in those laboratories, I'll never know. And why we're doing research with American dollars in those foreign countries of threats, I'll never know either. I want to thank President Trump. In his first term, he welcomed USDA's Economic Research Service and National Institute of Food and Agriculture to Kansas City, which complements the National Bioagro Defense Facility in Manhattan. This synergy makes Kansas a global hub for agriculture innovation. Our strength lies in our collaboration. By uniting public and private sectors with land-grant universities like my alma mater, the fighting, ever-fighting, mighty Wildcats of Kansas State University, we're building a resilient food supply. There you go, Coach Tuberville. Let's go Wildcats. I want to just commend the Department of Defense and all the agencies up here today for your joint efforts to combat diseases like avian influenza, screwworm, and foot and mouth, protecting our farmers and communities. And finally this, let me just concur with Coach Tuberville that I'm going to champion for the Secretary of Agriculture to be part of CFIUS. President Trump could appoint her, and Congress can make that legal for years to come as well. That's the best way to counter these emerging threats. Think about it. China right now owns land next to Whiteman Air Force Base, where our B-2s were launched that did just a spectacular job of, yes, obliterating Iran's nuclear armament. They own land next to Fort Riley, Kansas, home of the Big Red 1 1st Infantry Division as well. We need someone who thinks agriculture when they wake up in the morning and they go to bed and they think of agriculture as national security. Again, we can't take our food supply for granted. Kansas is leading the way, but it takes a national resolve to protect our farms, to fortify our biosecurity, and keep America's food in Americans' hands. Thank you so much. God bless us. Have a great day.
Thank you. Quick announcement, as of this afternoon, I will be officially a member of CFIUS, so that is happening. It's an incredible team at USDA and our great Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. Finally, from the amazing agriculture state of Pennsylvania and chair of the House Agriculture Committee, please help me welcome G.T. Thompson.
Good morning, everybody.
What a glorious day. A great day for making hay, and a great day for making history. For making history in terms of making sure that we are taking these next steps to secure both farm security and food security, which quite frankly is national security. As chairman of the House Agriculture Committee, I'm so appreciative to President Trump, to Secretaries Rollins, Hegseth, and Nome, as well as Attorney General Bondi for their recognition that food security is national security. In the Agriculture Committee's preparation for the Farm Food and National Security Act, we identified threats to food security impacting America's #1 and most essential industry, which is agriculture. Our farmers are on the front lines of food security, and that is essential to our national security. America's farm families are facing serious challenges, from foreign threats to our farmland and the theft of our intellectual property, to high energy costs driven by out-of-control inflation from the previous administration, market instability, poor SNAP integrity, crushing taxes, extreme weather, and an often unreliable workforce. All of these make life harder for America's farm, ranch, and forestry families, and jeopardizes our country's food security. I want to thank President Trump for using every tool at his disposal to make America's food supply safer. The One Big Beautiful Bill included a historic investment in our agriculture value chain, including provisions from the Bipartisan Farm Food and National Security Act. The One Big Beautiful Bill includes investments to strengthen our livestock biosecurity from foreign animal disease, as well as delivers major tax relief, shields the next generation of farmers from the death tax, supports affordable energy policies that keep family farms running and food prices low. It includes historic integrity measures for the SNAP program and so much more. But there's still a lot of work left to be done. On behalf of the House Agriculture Committee, I look forward to partnering with Secretary Rollins and others across the administration on this important initiative. Farm and food security is national security. Thank you to President Trump and this dynamic cabinet team for your commitment and your leadership. God bless and thank you so much.
Okay, everyone, we're going to open it up for some questions. I would note that while we were standing here and all of you were sitting there, it's too bad Secretary Bobby Kennedy's not here because we're all getting a lot of vitamin D today. So we'll let him know. He'd be very proud. All right, we'll take some questions from the press.
Okay. Thank you, Secretary Rollins. Mary Margaret with the Daily Wire. 2 questions, if that's okay. First of all, I'm seeing on this map that there's a lot of Chinese-owned farmland in California. Are you looking into the severity of that and what those consequences are? And then number 2, the president has expressed concerns about how mass deportations would affect the farm industry. Do you have concerns on this front? And are you hearing about some of these top conservatives saying that there's a push for amnesty for this workforce?
Well, thank you for those questions. The first thing I'll say on California, and I'd love for anyone else to join me if they have thoughts on that, is this, that a lot of people said, well, look at the red states are the ones leading the way. The red states are the ones that are banning the Chinese-owned farmland, and this is true. But I have to believe that even the Democrat governors and even the blue states realize what a massive threat this is to national security and how important it is. So we plan to work with everyone, no matter which party, no matter which side of the aisle they're from, to ensure that the people of this country and our agriculture farmland is protected. The second question, I appreciate you bringing that up. There's been a lot of noise in the last few days and a lot of questions about where the president stands and his vision for farm labor. The first thing I'll say is the president has been unequivocal that there will be no amnesty, and I think that's very, very important. I and the rest of our cabinet certainly support that, effectuate that, and make sure that happens every single day. The second thing, to your question about mass deportations, the president and I have spoken about that once or twice, and he has always been of the mindset that at the end of the day, the promise to America to ensure that we have a 100% American workforce stands, but we must be strategic in how we are implementing the mass deportation so as not to compromise our food supply. Ultimately, the answer on this is automation, also some reform within the current governing structure. And then also, when you think about, there are 34 million able-bodied adults in our Medicaid program. There are plenty of workers in America, but we just have to make sure we're not compromising today, especially in the context of everything we're thinking about right now. So no amnesty under any circumstances. Mass deportations continue, but in a strategic and intentional way as we move our workforce toward more automation and toward a 100% American workforce. And ultimately, it's the wonderful members of Congress behind me who are taking this on the fixing the current immigration system. So thank you so much.
Madam Secretary, thank you. First of all, condolences, thoughts, and prayers to all the folks back in Texas. It is near and dear to your heart. A couple quick thoughts. Congratulations on the success of getting at least partially, the death tax repealed in the BBB, because, as we all know, it affects farmers disproportionately to a great extent. Congratulations on that. Also, egg prices today, just right now, hit $2.49 a dozen. A clear 55% below the failed Bidenomics egg price. And we all know it's not just about eggs, but it has become a metaphor for inflation. So congratulations, because food inflation is coming down. That's a testament to you.
Thank you.
The thought and the question follow-up is, what a great group you put together here. Wonderful, wonderful idea. Surprising it hasn't been done sooner here. So the question is, has President Trump talked to you about this group, number one? And I guess equally as important, have the Chinese government, either officially or unofficially, reached out to you about this program?
So the first thing I'll say, and I appreciate that so much. Who are you with?
It's Eric Bowling. I'm with
That's
the
right.
Bowling Show.
Eric, thank you. And with the Bowling Show, it's great to have you, and thank you for making your way. I would like to note, and it's not lost on you, Eric, but I want to make sure everyone understands, this cabinet and this administration is different. That in previous administrations, I don't know that you would ever see 4 cabinet secretaries, a counselor to the president, one of the most steadfast, loyal patriots who've stood beside him, Peter Navarro, ever come out together on a morning in 100-degree weather and talk about agriculture, farmland. But we are all in this together, and the president has been resolute in ensuring that we do everything that needs to be done to protect the homeland. So I'm very, very proud of that. On the second question, I don't want to get ahead of the president, so I won't answer that. One of the chief lessons I've learned over many years is never get ahead of President Trump. But there is no doubt that he, our cabinet, our administration, our friends across the country are acutely aware of this issue and doing everything we can to solve for it. Eric, thank you for being here. Next question.
Thank you, Secretary Rollins. Jackson Richmond at the Epoch Times. Was Secretary Rubio consulted on this, given the national security aspect of this, and then was the CDC consulted, given the bioterrorism aspect of this?
Yes, all of the above were consulted. To get to this point, a little bit of sausage making for everyone. It's not just we throw an event together and here we all are. The layers and layers and layers of work to go through all of the agencies is of utmost importance. And what I have learned now in a little bit of my time in government is that often, and this is the reason you don't see the ball moving down the field very often, the amount of effort it takes to integrate and work, and the long nights and the sleepless nights, especially by our team, our incredible chief of staff. Kaylee Buller is the one who's really been driving this alongside the rest of our team, is really inspiring. So yes, they've all been consulted. Everyone has been incredibly supportive to get to this point today. But what I would like to say as well, and thank you for that question, is that this is just the beginning. Today is the first step to get us to this announcement as we begin this important work. You'll be hearing a lot from us on this over the next 4 years, and some real metrics in place that we're putting, like how do we measure our success? And I think that's what makes this administration different. So thank you for being here. Love the Epoch Times. And next question.
Yes, Philip Rasher with AgriPulse. I wanted to have two questions. One, following up on the immigration question. The president has continually said that he wants to give farmers some kind of temporary pass. Could you define what he means by a temporary pass? Does that mean ICE won't go onto farms for a certain period? What does he mean by that? The second question is, what are you going to do at USDA with regard to the remaining property owned by Syngenta and Smithfield Foods, which is a large portion of this Chinese-owned land?
That's right. Well, the second question first, as we discussed earlier, and Mr. Navarro, again, and he and his team over at the White House, amongst many others, we are looking at every available option. There are multiples of options. You'll likely see an executive order on this very soon from the White House, and we'll be looking at multiple different authorities within the federal government to begin to claw that back. So that's what I'll say about that. Again, I think I answered the second question, where we are on farm labor, a little bit earlier, but what I will say is that Lori Chavez DeRimmer is our Secretary of Labor, and the H-2A visa program, all of the programs that inure to moving in seasonal ag workers are under Secretary Chavez DeRimmer. She has been working around the clock with her team. I think we'll probably hear a little bit more about this today, and the conversations will continue. But I can't underscore enough, there will be no amnesty. The mass deportations continue, but in a strategic way, and we move the workforce towards automation and 100% American participation, which again, with 34 million people, able-bodied adults on Medicaid, we should be able to do that fairly quickly. Thank you.
One more question.
Hi, thanks for doing this. Kate Goodell with the Washington Post. I'm wondering if you can perhaps spell out some of the specific threats that we're seeing with Chinese farmland at the moment. I also wanted to ask about the legislative efforts and what form the executive action might take and whether you have a timeline.
Well, first on American farmland, and I'd love for Peter to add to this, and if anyone else would like to as well. When you look at the chart, which is behind our, by the way, our new Deputy Secretary Stephen Vaden started yesterday from the great state of Tennessee, Governor Lee. You can see on this chart the hundreds of thousands, and by the way, this is just China-owned. This is not other countries of concern owned, such as North Korea, Russia, Iran, and others. You can see that a lot of those, the red blocks, are actual military bases. And ultimately, when we're talking about national security, that is, I think, the number one concern, certainly of this administration, is what's happening there as we're looking at the threats that this country is facing. But specifically through agriculture is really, really important. Peter, I don't know if you want to add to that.
And thanks for asking that question. If you look at the gradations of threat, that's the most obvious. I mean, how did we let that happen? How did we let that happen? And CFIUS, Greek word, I think, for like doing nothing, right? But not during the Trump administration. And I can tell you, if nothing else happened today, having Brooke Rollins on that board, give her a hand. That's a big deal. But if you look at the concept here of unrestricted warfare that I talked a little about earlier, it's not just the idea that you can surveil troop movements, flights, all the things you would worry about just from a pure national security view. But you remember when they arrested the Chinese spies on the Iowa farmland? You all remember that? I mean, that was another turning point in our awareness, where they were, so if they're owning the farmland, they have access to all of they're going to get the seeds that way too. And so ultimately, the other thing they want to do is, which is why they bought Smithfield Foods. I don't know if you know this, but China consumes 50% of the pork in the world. Did you know this? That's astonishing. I think we got the corner on Kentucky Fried Chicken, but they cornered the pork. So when they acquire Smithfield's Foods and the entire pork chain, it's like that becomes a weapon in and of itself. So the more land they acquire here, the more control they have. And it's a business model. I mean, we're the United States, but they treat us like a colony. They do the same damn thing down in Zambia with tobacco and around all of Africa. They buy land, they bring in Chinese workers to work the land, and then they ship the food back to China, and the people around starve or pay higher prices. So when you ask us, what's this about? It's about everything. Food security is national security. Thank you.
I want to make a comment, if you don't mind. So, to me, the Chinese owning land is just a small piece of the puzzle. I'm much more concerned about the food supply down the road here, that right now foreign entities own about a fifth of the protein processing. Between beef and pork, JBS and Smithfield own about a fifth, maybe a fourth of the protein processing in this entire country. That's just wrong. I think beyond that, it's the intellectual property theft. It's the Chinese scientists that are in our own universities and research that are stealing intellectual property. It wasn't too long ago they were taking rice seeds from my alma mater. The Attorney General mentioned something up in Michigan. It's that constant threat. But what really keeps me awake, the real threat to me, the biggest, is bioterrorism. If you could imagine a COVID-like virus made in a laboratory in Wuhan, China, that could infect all the hogs of the world, but you had an mRNA vaccine that could protect your own hogs, what would that do to our world's food supply? That's what keeps me up, and that's why I'm a big proponent of the work being done at NBAT, the National Agro Research Defense Facility in Manhattan, Kansas as well. I think that's the biggest active threat that I see is bioterrorism.
Agreed.
I think Senator Marshall really put a nice overview on the different threats. Really, you know, American agriculture, I think, is defined as science, technology, and innovation. And all those are amazing. It defines agriculture today, but it also leads the way for agriculture over the horizon for the future. But it can be very vulnerable if we don't protect that. And in the past, we haven't provided protections for that. The science, the technology, the innovation that comes out of this great country, out of this essential industry. And I think the fact that today we're declaring that food security is national security, farm security is a part of that. I think this is a great milestone of making sure that we're protecting all of that for the future. America needs, we always want America to be in the lead no matter what we're talking about. But certainly when it comes to the thing that is probably most essential, and that is food and fiber, energy materials, building resources, all the things that come off that rural agriculture acreage, we have a duty and responsibility to make sure that those things are secure. So, Secretary, thank you for your leadership and vision on this. Much appreciated.
Timing is coming very soon. We'll continue to announce further steps to answer your final question. Listen, everyone, thank you so much for being here. It's really, really an honor to have you all here at the People's Department. Abraham Lincoln founded this department in 1862 to ensure that the American farmers and ranchers and rural prosperity, rural way of life was represented here in Washington. So thank you, and everyone can gather over on the right for Coach Tuberville's next workout. All right, thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Introduction. This is an invitation for you to participate in the next revolution, the return of power back to the people, just as the Constitution intended. Why is a revolution needed? Just one shocking fact tells the story. If you take inflation into account, in 1972 the average American worker earned $738.86 a week. In 2016, the figure was $723.67 a week. 44 years and a pay cut of 2%. That's why we need a revolution. But why a populist revolution? Why must it return power to the people? The case I'll make to you in this book is that the institutions and policies that shape today's economy, society, and government overwhelmingly benefit those at the top, not just the famous 1%, but more like the top 20%, that working Americans have been left out of the many great advances made by this elite in the last few decades, and that the ladder into the elite is mostly broken. I want to show you that this state of affairs, intimately linked to the transformative trends of our time, globalization and technology, is not inevitable or something outside our control like the weather, but is instead the result of deliberate policy choices made by the elite who benefit from them. Those policy choices are an ideology in their own right, shared by a ruling class of Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals, and we can describe that ideology as elitism. Elitism's defining characteristic, and the central reason for its failure, is the concentration of economic and political power in the hands of the few, not the many. That's why we need a specifically populist revolution. The result of the 2016 presidential election and Great Britain's Brexit vote to leave the European Union 5 months before were the first tangible signs that such a revolution may be possible. In both cases, members of the ruling class, in all mainstream political parties, in business, in academia, in the bureaucracy and in the media, were united on one side, yet voters chose the other. But those votes themselves were not the revolution. It's what happens next that matters. Will the election of Donald Trump, the Brexit vote, and other eruptions of populist sentiment at the ballot box turn out to be vocal but insubstantial phenomena that leave the underlying power structures unchanged? Or will we see a decisive shift of power from the elite to the rest of society? This book sets out ideas for long-term change that would bring about that power shift and thereby deliver the positive promise of populism to improve the standard of living and quality of life for working people, to strengthen the ties of family, community and nation that bind us, ties that have become so horribly frayed of late, to make government more accountable and responsive, and to do all this in a way that is open and welcoming. But populism will only be positive if we, you, make it so. We need to reclaim the revolution from those who would take it in a different direction. Until now, populism has been defined by the people who don't believe in it. It's been characterized by elites on the left as nativist, even racist, by elites on the right as unconservative or anti-capitalist. The people's anger has horrified the elites on all sides, and no wonder. The technocrats, bureaucrats and corporatists from Wall Street to Silicon Valley, from Brussels to Davos and back to Washington, D.C., sense a threat to their power. They may not really understand the revolutionary impulse, but they do see it as a terrible impertinence. Regardless, there are good reasons for the rage at today's establishment: insecurity in the present, anxiety about the future, and impatience for change. It adds up to a whole lot of anger. But anger without an agenda leads to self-pity and further frustration. That's why the populist revolution needs to be fashioned into a coherent and positive political philosophy, one that understands and respects today's anti-elite sentiment, but channels it away from any dark ends toward constructive and lasting transformation of our economy, society, and government. We all know, or think we know, what populism is against. Now it's time to spell out what populism is for. Making. All right, Susan Shelley is here. A lot of really meaty stuff to get into. Elitism and extremism that we have in California. There's a bunch of new information that you need to know about that. That's all coming up. But I wanted to start today with the latest news from President Trump on the global stage, because it's quite extraordinary to watch. If you see how he's operating, the level he's operating at, and the scale and speed of things he's getting accomplished, it's quite extraordinary. It's someone who's really absolutely at the peak of their powers, master of this domain. Of course, foreign policy is the area of policy that the president has most power over, most immediate individual power over, compared to all the other areas of policy where you have to deal with Congress or the states or regulation of the bureaucracy. When it comes to this foreign security, trade policy in particular, as you were seeing with President Trump, there's great leeway for personal leadership. And wow, are we seeing that from President Trump? I don't think we've ever seen anything like this. And the thing that it reminds me of over and over again, as you see him in action, is what I've always said about him, which is that he is not an ideologue. He is a pragmatic, problem-solving person with a business mindset. Sees a problem, says, well, how am I going to solve it? And takes whatever steps are necessary in a pragmatic way to make it happen. And this is what people seem to just get. It's such a change from what we've seen from politicians over the year. I think it's still, after all these years, it's now 10 years since Donald Trump first entered the political arena, and still, it seems, the commentators don't get it. We'll get to trade in a second, but I want to give you an example that popped up in the last couple of days when the president was in Scotland playing some golf, but also taking on really serious issues, meeting with Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the European Commission, the bureaucratic part of the EU, and they talked about all these different issues. And one of the ones that came up was Putin, of course, and the war in Europe with Ukraine, the invasion that happened now, it's getting 2.5 years ago, still going on, brutal war. The president's been really clear about wanting to end it. And the thing that is so interesting to me is that people are surprised to see what's happening, which is that President Trump, after having tried one approach, which was to have a warm relationship with Putin and try to use, if you like, the carrot of a better relationship and speaking respectfully about Putin and trying to cajole him into ending the war, has lost patience with that approach and is now going in the other direction, and is increasingly disillusioned publicly in the remarks he makes about Putin, and is now threatening him very directly and threatening Russia very directly. And the news that came out of the last few days of meetings in Scotland was President Trump saying, I gave him 50 days to come to the negotiating table and figure out a way to end the war in a positive manner. I'm done with that. He's not interested in talking. I'll give him maybe another 10 or 12 days. And everyone says, oh, it's what's going on with Trump? He used to be this. No, he's just a pragmatic problem solver. He tried one way, it didn't work, so now he's doing the other way. There's no ideology. This is the thing that people miss about Trump. It's not that he kind of is intellectually, philosophically in line with Putin, not Ukraine or whatever. It's nothing like that. It's just he doesn't. I suspect doesn't particularly care. He just wants to stop the war. And whatever the best way at any particular time, that's what he will pursue. It seems to me so obvious that, because this is, and then they accuse him of flip-flopping or whatever. It's that framing of it as flip-flopping or whatever. That's the framing of the past, where you had politicians who were ideologues, who had an intellectual theory, a philosophical approach that was, fixed. And they said, this is what I believe and this is what I'm doing. I don't care about the facts. I don't care what happens in the real world. This is what I believe and this is what I'm going to do. That's been the model for politics for as long as anyone can remember. Trump's ripped that up. He's not like that. He's a pragmatic problem solver. And so judging him on the basis of whether he changes his approach or his mind on things is just ridiculous, because of course he just wants the end. He wants the result. Doesn't matter how you get there. And previously, with the sort of old-fashioned political framing, it was all about the method, and the result was secondary, as long as you were sticking to your principles and your philosophy and whatever. And it's amazing to me that they haven't got that. And you see it in action with Trump the whole time. And you see it, of course, in these negotiations. And that's why, 1 minute it's very friendly, and then he'll put out a post that's very aggressive. Or you saw it with the EU. Where about a month or so ago, and he put out something warm and let's work together, and then he heard from the negotiations on tariffs and trade that the EU were messing around, and he put out an incredibly hostile post on social media attacking the EU and Ursula von der Leyen, and then the next day she put out something much more conciliatory. They were back at the table, and you see the result in the deal that they've just announced, which is an extraordinary deal. It's very important to understand how historic this is. Look, I worked in 10 Downing Street when Britain was part of the EU. I saw the way they behave. I saw the attitude. It's incredibly arrogant. They have this belief that people should be so lucky as to get access to the EU, and they've been very, very protectionist, because you've got protectionist countries, particularly France, at the heart of the EU, and have been for since its inception. And so really for 80 years or so now, the EU has been hostile to other countries coming into the market. They want the single market, the European single market as it's evolved over the years, free and open access within the EU, but putting up barriers to trade from outside. That's what they've been doing. And so the fact that you've got this deal now with President Trump, he's negotiated this deal for zero tariffs, open access to the EU, as if the US were a member of the EU in terms of selling things into the EU. But in exchange, the EU agreed to a 15% tariff for goods that the EU is selling into you. What does that tell you? Number one, it shows you how skewed it has been up till now. If the EU thinks that 0% and open access for the US and 15% tariffs for them is good, that's an improvement on what they had before, that shows you how biased it's been in the EU's favor. The point that President Trump's been making all along, that they've had it all their own way, that they've been able to access the US market for practically nothing, while they put up barriers for people to access the EU market. And he's just called them on it, and they've agreed. I mean, of course, you could say, well, they've agreed because his original tariff that he applied was higher than 15%, 30%, I believe it was, whatever. It's a negotiation. But it's more than that. That's just, everyone knows how these things work. What it really reveals is the fundamental imbalance that was there all along. And this is the first president ever, who's actually stood up to the EU, called their bluff on their protectionism, and got them to abandon it, at least insofar as the US is concerned. It's an absolutely massive victory, a massive victory. And you can see how what a big deal it is, because, of course, the most protectionist of them all, France, and President Macron hates it. He put out some statement saying, this is terrible. I'm not his accent, that's terrible. But this is terrible. It's a surrender, capitulation. I can't remember the words he uses, basically saying that this was the EU caving to the US. But yes, kind of. But because the facts are on President Trump's side, the reality is on President Trump's side. And for so long, US presidents have been completely deferential and just gone along with it in order not to, I don't know, not to upset them or something. They just haven't had that kind of strong mentality of, I don't care what nasty things you say about me. I'm just going to get a good deal. And that's what President Trump has done here. And it just shows you the difference when you have this kind of approach, this pragmatic, problem-solving, negotiation-led approach, rather than a political, ideologically-led approach. It's a huge change, both in operating style, but also in terms of the results. It's absolutely massive. And of course, if you add to that what you've seen in the week before, you had a big trade deal with Japan. There's negotiations going on with China. You can be sure that the China thing will connect to Putin, because clearly the leverage against Putin is going to be the rest of the world. Because right now you've got very, very tough sanctions on Putin ever since the invasion from the European countries and so on. But it hasn't really made any difference, because Russia's been bailed out by China, and to a lesser extent India. And so they've been able to finance their war machine, including, by the way, thanks to Gavin Newsom in California. We made this point earlier, which is that now that we are importing, because of the disastrous climate policies, we're going to talk about that later on with Susan, now that we are importing not just crude oil in California from around the world, because Newsom and the Democrats have progressively shutting down our own oil and gas industry in California. We're now importing, because of the refinery regulations and refineries closing, we are now importing finished gasoline from countries like India and Turkey. And guess where that comes from? Russia. So indirectly, Gavin Newsom is financing Putin's war machine. All of that may well be about to end, because clearly President Trump has lost patience with Putin. And the next step is going to be, I think, global economic sanctions that really bite, rather than what you have now, which he can wriggle out of. But I mean, who would bet against Trump making it happen and actually genuinely bringing the war to an end? Because, I mean, look at these results. Everything's gone his way since he first announced the tariff policy, and the whole world was up in arms, and all these experts, oh, it's terrible, it's going to crash the world economy, everyone's going to lose out, it's going to be a disaster. At the time, I was asked about it. I did lots of media, and I was asked about it, and you had these reactions and massive tariffs in retaliation and so on, and people would talk about massive inflation coming. I said, look, judge it when the process is completed, not right now, right at the beginning. It's a process. It's a negotiation. You've got to see where it ends up. It's ridiculous to judge it on day one. You need to judge it when you get to the end. And now we're getting to the end, and these deals are being done, and they're spectacularly good. They are spectacularly good for America. And I just think it's yet another example where President Trump keeps proving the experts wrong and the establishment commentators wrong, because he's just playing a completely different game from them. And they've never seen it before. But what amazes me is they've kind of seen it for the last 10 years. This is how he operates, but they still haven't got used to it. We'll see if maybe if the next phase works, if the deal with China works, and then the leverage on Russia, maybe that will finally wake them up to the success of this completely unprecedented approach to global policy making, to deal making, to foreign policy, all these things we've seen, and particularly in this second term. When you look at the scale of what's been done, I mean, the situation with Iran and the Middle East and all of these different things coming together in a masterful deployment of American power in a way that we've never seen before. Maybe one day they will wake up and appreciate just the scale of the difference that President Trump is making. All right, Susan Shelley is here. A lot of really meaty stuff to get into. We're going to start with something that popped into the news on Friday last week, which was President Trump issuing a new executive order on homelessness, which is incredibly interesting. We'll talk about that with Susan. But actually, there's a whole bunch of really, really interesting climate-related news to discuss as well for California, including the most hilarious opinion piece from Gavin Newsom in the Wall Street Journal bragging about California and clean energy and all this nonsense. And as I was reading it, I literally was thinking of you, Susan, thinking you know how to rebut practically every single line in this article. We're not going to have time to do every single line, but we've got the kind of real, the real beauties, as President Trump would say. We're going to go through them. And then actually even to prove how disastrous this whole climate thing is for them, there's extremism, climate elitism as well is what it is. There's some news on one of the bills that the Democrats are pushing forward because they know how damaging it all is. So, a lot to get into today. Let's start with the homelessness executive order at the end of last week. Susan, what did it say?
Well, President Trump signed an order that he called Ending Crime and Disorder on America's Streets. And what he's doing is using the influence of the federal funding to push the states to create more civil commitment for people who are on the streets who are mentally ill and not able to care for themselves. And interestingly, he put some language in there that they're not just calling it homelessness in the usual fuzzy language that we hear in California. He's calling it open illicit drug use, urban camping, and urban squatting. And that, I think, is a
Really
line in the
interesting.
sand. It is. He's changing the language of how we talk about the situation. He's talking also about mental illness, drug addiction, and the problem of needing housing.
It's a
He's talking
brilliant
about all
point,
of
Susan.
it.
Can I just stop you there? Because this is why you're so great. I saw this on Friday. I was actually on with Stuart Varney talking about it. I jumped to some of the policy points, and we'll get into that in a second. But actually, what you've highlighted there, and I read the whole executive order as well, but you've spotted something incredibly, actually not incredibly, it just is fundamental, totally reframing the issue. Because those phrases, urban camping, what do you call it? Urban camping, urban squatting.
Camping and urban squatting and open
Right.
illicit drug use.
So that all of that it's just brilliant, actually, because it really underlines the point that I've been making all along, thanks to you, what you have, we've been talking about this for years, which is that it's all of this that we see and have been seeing for years is illegal. It's all illegal and has been. And they can hide behind whatever Supreme Court changes and whatever, but it's been illegal all along, and they haven't enforced the law. And this framing, as you say, really makes that point.
Yes, it does. And by calling it disorder, he's putting the focus on the effect that it has on the community, on the businesses, on the school children walking on the sidewalk, on everybody else. It is disorder on the streets, and he is a law and order president, and that has always been a successful political platform in American politics. Law and order has always done very well, and he's going there. He's also going after the Housing First policy. He directed the Attorney General to the extent possible to end support for Housing First that deprioritizes accountability. Very interesting language. There's nothing in there, probably because he couldn't do it in an executive order, there's nothing in there about that provision in the Medicaid law that prohibits reimbursement for care in large hospitals. As you know, care in a large mental hospital with more than 16 beds is ineligible for Medicaid reimbursement from the federal government. That dates back to 1965. And in Trump's first term, he offered states a waiver from that so that they could use funding for large mental hospitals. California refuses to build them, refuses to ask for a waiver. I think that's coming, but it wasn't in this executive order.
Well, I mean, we basically, if I go right back to the beginning of you and I talking about this, I always called it the Susan Shelley plan on homelessness. Number one, enforce the law. Number two, repeal Housing First. Number three, the point you just made about the waiver from the institutions of mental disease rules from Medicaid. So he's just hit 1 and 2 because framing it as a law and order issue and urban squatting, urban camping, which are illegal, and illicit drug use. That's exactly right. And then number two is repealing Housing First. Now, of course, Housing First is actually a law in California passed in 2016. They didn't call it that, but that's what it is. And we're the only state that's actually taken that approach, which is to say any organization receiving government money for work with homeless people cannot require sobriety, addiction treatment, anything in exchange for the housing, the shelter. You just have to give them housing, regardless of anything else. It's illegal to require anything in exchange. Now, they haven't, obviously he can't repeal the state law, but actually the more I've dug into this issue, a huge amount of the funding for the counties does come from the HUD, from the federal government. So this really will have an impact in California.
Yes, it will. And to the extent that any of this is woven into federal laws or federal regulations, he's going to go after that. So I think that's really important, to return accountability to the discussion, instead of saying all you have to do is give people free stuff and a miracle happens, because that just doesn't work. It hasn't worked. And it's an unfortunate situation. Taxpayers have put hundreds of billions of dollars into this effort, and it isn't better. The best they can show with a very sketchy count, the homeless point in time count in Los Angeles, very sketchy. But even if you accept the numbers as real, all they've done is drop slightly from the huge rise that we've seen since 2019. So it's very concerning.
Yes, and all this money, and that's what people are so furious about, because we've had the audits now in California. And the numbers keep going up, 24 billion, 32, all these billions and billions of our money spent on this problem, only for it to get worse, the numbers to increase, and the public order aspect, the chaos on the streets to get worse. And even when they say that they're dealing with it, actually they're not really. They're just moving it around from one place to another. I saw it for myself in San Francisco when I was there the second day of my campaign. And I was on the street with Tom Wolfe, who's a great guy, an advocate. He was a former street addict, now an advocate for the kind of changes that you and I want to see. And he took me around some of the parts of San Francisco that were notorious for just the sort of absolute third world conditions of squalor. And actually we were there and it was pretty bad. But he said, this is nothing. I mean, this is really cleaned up just in the last few weeks. The new mayor, their police are coming in, they're making sweeps, they're moving people on. I said, oh, so it's really working. He said, well, in the daytime. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I said, where do they go? When they take people from the street, where do they put them? They send them to a triage center run by the city. And then what happens? Well, at the end of the day, they're kicked out again because there's nowhere for them to go. And so they move people during the day. And he said, if you came back here tonight, it would be just like it was before. And same in LA, you hear reports of Karen Bass and they're talking about her program, but it's just moving people from one part of the city to another.
Right. Well, part of the problem is that the government in California has decided that everything has to be a studio apartment in a nice building, in any neighborhood, any city council district. So they want homeless housing in Pacific Palisades. Well, wow, that's great. Wouldn't we all like to have an ocean view property in Pacific Palisades? So you're asking the taxpayers in California to fund something that's nicer than what they can afford themselves for people who are making all these wrong choices in their life. And the people who are making the right choices and setting the alarm clocks and not using drugs, they just pay. And the people who are using drugs, they can have the apartment with the ocean view. At some point, that is going to cause tremendous resentment. We have raised the sales tax in Los Angeles County to try and address homelessness. If this is how they're going to address homelessness, everybody can stay on the street till they can have a studio apartment in a great part of the city. I don't think that's going to play with people for very long.
It's
it may
absolutely
already
outrageous.
be over.
And you're right. And it's symptomatic of the central driving moral failing of this one-party rule that we've seen, which is that, and I say this, and it's true on so many issues, that the people who do the right thing are punished, hounded, harassed, and the people who do the wrong thing are rewarded. And that's just what people are getting so sick of in California.
There's a point. There's a point at which people won't do it anymore, and I think we're there.
I want to just hit this point while we're, just in case people haven't heard us discuss this before. It's very important because in this conversation around homelessness, and I saw it in some of the reaction to the Trump executive order, was, well, the cities and counties couldn't have done anything about it until recently because of a Ninth Circuit Court ruling. Now, that was overturned just last year by the Supreme Court, grants pass, and now they can do it, but for years they weren't able to do it. And it's really important to nail that. It's not true. The cities and counties were hiding behind that Ninth Circuit ruling. Could you just explain that, because this does come up in this conversation?
Absolutely. There were a lot of lawsuits when cities tried to enforce an anti-camping ordinance. There were a lot of lawsuits from groups like the ACLU that said, this is criminalizing poverty. You can't do it. It's cruel and unusual punishment. It's prohibited by the 8th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. California cities can't do this. And they won some of those cases up to the Ninth Circuit. And eventually it was overturned, as you said, in the Grants Pass case. And what happened there is the Supreme Court said it doesn't violate the 8th Amendment to enforce a generally applicable anti-camping ordinance. So as long as you're enforcing it equally against everybody, it's not unconstitutional. And the situation now is that cities have the option to enforce an anti-camping ordinance without having to meet a long list of Ninth Circuit vague requirements for what is shelter, what is adequate shelter, how many people are eligible. There's no more of that back and forth negotiating. Cities can make their own decision on how to enforce it. Los Angeles refuses to do it. Los Angeles County refuses to do it. Los Angeles City refuses to do it. But many of the other smaller cities are doing it. And so that is probably going to result in people just moving around over the boundaries, which is not a good situation.
Yeah. But they could have done it all along. I mean, this is the point that's infuriating, is that the original ruling that they said, oh, sorry, our hands are tied, the Ninth Circuit ruling just said you have to have, I mean, it's now been overturned, so that's good. But even with that ruling, they could have done more than they did, because the ruling said you have to have shelter available for everyone who needs it in your area, right? Before you move anyone on.
Exactly. And they never said it has to be a studio apartment. It could be all different kinds of shelter available. Exactly.
So they could have provided affordable, low cost, simple, if necessary, mass shelter, right?
Right.
But they decided to define it under pressure from these non-profits and the homeless industrial complex. They defined shelter as an apartment.
Yes, and because of this idea of this housing first mentality, which may not even apply to the shelters, I'm not sure, but they would never turn people away if they were violent, if they were criminal. And as a result, you would have problems inside the shelters because there was no enforcement of basic civility to protect everybody who was in the shelters. So the shelters had terrible stories too. And then that was used as a justification to say, well, shelter is not the answer. We have to build apartments. There's never going to be enough money to build those apartments for everybody who wants to have an apartment in California. It's just not going to work, especially at the expense of people who can't afford it themselves and are paying taxes.
So basically, what we're seeing is through a combination of the Supreme Court ruling, albeit they didn't need it, but now it's there. There's really no excuse. And then the executive order from the Trump administration really making clear what we need to see happen, and that affects a lot of the federal money that's coming into the system, there's just no excuse for any of this anymore, like at all.
Right. So what President Trump is doing is through federal funding, he's going to try to coerce cities like Los Angeles into policies that will be effective instead of these policies that have failed.
Yes.
And we'll see if that will work. I guess
well,
it depends.
I mean, the point is that you don't see this in other places. You don't see it when you go to, I mean, of course there are homeless people over a big city, but you don't see the scale of it, this mass crisis, this squalor on the streets. You don't see it in Florida. You don't see it in Europe. You don't see it anywhere except these left-wing run places.
Right. Well, they're doing another thing that's in this executive order is an end to funding for harm reduction programs. So that's very important. He wants recovery. He wants evidence-based recovery programs to be funded, but not free needles on the street that encourage people to come to these locations and use drugs and die on the sidewalks. That is not a policy that is worthy of the United States of America. And it's sad that people think it should be that way in California. And the people who think that are in government, and that is horrendous.
So just to sort of draw a line under this, if you want to read more about this, obviously read the executive order, but actually I would encourage people, if you're really interested in it, to dig in to the paper on homelessness called Ending Homelessness, because it can be, mass homelessness can be ended, should be ended, from Golden Together, my policy organization. You and I talked about that before, Susan. Michelle Steeb, who's done some great work on this, she played a part in that. It's on our goldentogether.com website. Check it out. And actually, this executive order, when I read it, it just reflects all of the thinking that went into that. So it's very, very good news. Let's talk about climate. Gavin Newsom loves talking about climate. There's been some news on that. Start with that. What's going on? He made some announcement about the cap and trade system, or what they call it now, cap and invest.
He's renamed it. Yes. This is the cap and trade program is run by the California Air Resources Board at the direction of the legislature going back to 2006, the Global Warming Solutions Act. And essentially what it's trying to do is reduce greenhouse gas emissions in California by charging people a lot of money for them. Well, the people they're charging are utilities, refineries, manufacturers, truckers. That's who's paying all of this. And who's getting the end cost? You, the consumer, the ratepayer, the taxpayer. You're getting the bill for all of these extra fees that are trying to discourage greenhouse gas emissions by charging for them. That's what this cap and trade program is. The courts have said it's not a tax because it's voluntary. If you don't want to pay it, you can go out of business. So therefore, it's voluntary. So now they want to just expand it and extend it. It expires in 2030. That will dry up the money. That will dry up the reason to go buy these permits that they trade. They buy them and trade them. So the governor wants to renew it through the budget process, not through the regular legislative process where they have to debate it on the floor, discuss it in committees, have a fiscal analysis of it. No. In the budget process where it will be amended into a blank bill as a budget trailer bill. And you can find it on the Department of Finance website, dof.ca.gov. That's where the trailer bill language is. They will come back in August and they'll try to pass this in 72 hours. When no one is watching.
But this is a huge this is amazing news, because this is a massive part of their sort of climate architecture of sort of nonsense that just costs everyone and gives us the highest gas prices, highest electricity prices in the country, which affects everyone directly. Of course, business, because it's, like you think about a restaurant using it, so it's a nightmare. And for example, when I made my announcement about how we're going to try and get to $3 gas when I'm the governor, a big part of that was actually rolling back some of the taxes that are and they are taxes. I mean, that's what it is.
Yes,
it's a tax. It's basically a tax on anyone who's using and producing fossil fuels.
Right. And it has no effect on the climate at all. California can marginally reduce its greenhouse gases. It has no effect on the climate globally. So all you're doing is charging the people of California a lot of money, which is then spent in Sacramento. And what are they spending it on? They spend it on the bullet train. Currently, 25% of the money that comes in from this cap and trade program for these permits, which are really taxes, it's spent to build the bullet train. And Governor Newsom wants to renew this program to 2045, and he wants to spend $1 billion a year $1 billion a year. That's an extra $15 billion on the bullet train, which is insane.
Does that keep the proportion from the thing at 25%?
I'm not sure if it keeps the 25% or it's more than 25%, or if they're changing it so it's a flat amount and he doesn't care what percent it is, but it's budget trailer bill language to rush through when no one is looking.
So
Do you remember,
the $1 billion, he's actually, that's a specific number?
that's a specific number that he has targeted. Now, the
And
legislature
you found
won't
that on the
necessarily-
website. So that's not on, they haven't announced this as it were, but you spotted it on the website.
DOF, Department of Finance, .ca.gov, dof.ca.gov. It's in the trailer bill language, and it's under, I think, environmental. You can click that and you can look for all the trailer bills and you can see what they're up to. And what they'll do is they'll take these enormous long pieces of legislation which affect policy, which go for years, and they will amend it into a blank bill. And they'll say, well, this doesn't have to go through policy committees or the regular process because it's only an amendment. It's only an amendment. It's an entire policy. Do you remember the income-based electricity rate?
Yes.
That was in a trailer bill. That was in the energy trailer bill. It was 20,000 words. It was an amendment to a blank bill, 72 hours, boom. And then later when it was implemented by the utility companies, which were required to put it out there, what they were going to charge based on income, a bunch of Democrats got upset and they said, well, we never voted for that. Oh, yes, you did vote for it. Here it is. Oh, well, we didn't know it was in there. Oh, yes, you did. It was in the bill analysis. Yes, you knew. And if you voted on it without knowing, that's on you.
I mean, first of all, though, we should just state for the record, this whole principle of trailer bills is an absolute abomination. I mean, what are you talking about? That you can just make it, you get something passed and then fill in the details later. These are the people who endlessly lecture us about our democracy. Amazing.
This is just raw power. This is a supermajority. No one can block it. The Republicans can't block it in Sacramento, and they're just rolling on this stuff. And it's raising the cost of living in California. It can be stopped. If cap and trade expires in 2030, it's like a giant cut in prices throughout California.
Yeah. And so how can it be stopped?
Well, I'm not sure how it can be stopped. Certainly if people know about it and they call their representatives.
But if it's just not renewed, I mean, that's the simple point.
Right.
If it's not
exactly.
renewed.
If it's not renewed, then it will end. Also, the President of the United States has issued an executive order saying that this has to end.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I'm just jumping in because I'm so excited. It's a huge deal. Everyone has to understand this is a huge deal because this is such a big part of the cost escalation in California and the climate extremism, climate elitism. So before we get to the Trump part of it, so a simple point would be vetoing the renewal makes it go away.
Right. Vetoing the renewal would make it go away, and defeating it in the legislature would make it go away.
Is the whole renewal in this trailer bill or just the part about the bullet train?
The whole renewal to 2045 is the
Wow.
last I looked. That was in the trailer bill language.
And will it be a separate bill or is it in another, how are they trying to hide it even further?
Well, it will be amended into a blank bill, and then it will have a bill number, and they'll introduce it, and then 72 hours later they can vote on it.
Okay, well, let's keep an eye on it. Do you have a timing on this?
They come back to work August 18th, and I think they're in session for about a month, so it will be.
All right. Well,
we're in August.
This is a very big moment for us to pay attention. I'll be just back from my vacation, so raring to go. Wow, this is huge. Now let's get to you said President Trump and cap and trade.
President Trump put out an executive order that said no more of these state laws that interfere with the energy markets nationally. And he targeted specifically California's cap and trade program as having these unreasonable extra fees for businesses to use carbon. And he wants them ended. He wants the Attorney General to look at all of them and determine if they are unconstitutional or if they're preempted by federal law. So that could happen, and that could end cap and trade in California from the federal level.
Do we have a timeline on that?
No, I think the Attorney General had something like 90 days to do a study of it. I don't know where that is in the process. But that could end the program for us.
But then presumably that would be some kind of litigation between the federal government and California.
Absolutely it would. California would go right to court. We really need to build a bullet train between Sacramento and the Supreme Court because there's a lot of
selling
traffic.
it with that. Exactly. Very interesting. Let's get to this Wall Street Journal article that Gavin Newsom wrote. And I was reading it, and as I went through it, I thought, you've got to be kidding. And it's just so full of nonsense. And some of it I could immediately say, I know why that's nonsense. And then as other parts, I thought, I think it's nonsense, but I know who will know it's nonsense, and that's Susan. So let's go through. As I was reading, I thought I really want to go through this for people. So, I mean, as I said at the beginning, we're not going to be able to take every single line because nearly all of it is just nonsense. But anyway, let's go through it. It appeared at the end of last week. The headline is Gavin Newsom, Clean Energy Powers California's Economic Growth. Subtitle, more than 2/3 of the state's electricity from sources such as solar, wind and geothermal. So the whole thing is bragging about California's climate leadership, all this stuff he likes to say. But let's go through it in detail, Susan.
Well, the first thing to know is that in the last 10 years since we've been doing this, electricity rates have doubled in California. So that's the first thing to know. And 1 in 5 utility customers are behind on paying their bills. So this is a huge issue of affordability. This is not a game.
Which he doesn't mention at all. So this whole article is bragging about the scale of it, how much of it we're moving from fossil fuels to renewable, blah, blah, blah. But at no point does he mention the cost of doing this.
People get their electric bills, they're falling on the floor from their electric bills in California, and they're only going higher. And it's going higher because of these state mandates and other factors that relate to the climate agenda. This is not a success story for the people of California.
No, but that's the background that's not even mentioned. But even within what he says, it's all just smoke and mirrors.
He bragged that 2/3 of the electricity in California comes from solar, wind, and geothermal. That's absolute nonsense. You can look at CAISO.com, CAISO.com, today's outlook supply. At any given moment, you can see we are running this state on natural gas, nuclear, large hydroelectric, and imported electricity. California imports more electricity than any other state on wires from other states that make it. We don't ask. The stork brought it. We don't know where it comes from. It doesn't come from solar and wind. It's coming from some sort of coal, natural gas, something else from another state. And that's how California runs. Every night the sun goes down. It doesn't matter if during the day you had 7 hours of enough solar energy to power the state. It doesn't matter.
When he says this, more than 2/3 of California's electricity now comes from clean sources, such as solar, wind, and geothermal. What, you're saying that's not right. Why? How can he say that then? What's he basing that on?
You know, it's some sort of math trickery. I don't know what he's counting. Maybe he's counting rooftops twice. I don't know what he's doing to get that number, but it's not true. And the other part is that when he brags that for some part of nearly every day.
So far this year, he says so far this year, clean energy fully powered California's grid an average 7 hours a day.
What that means is when we get to 2045, when the state is mandated to be 100% renewable, no natural gas, no nuclear, no large hydro, because they don't count that as renewable. When we get there, you'll have electricity for some part of nearly every day. Happy with that? You turn the lights on, they don't go on? Oh, well, right now we don't have it because we're 100% clean. We need reliable energy. And we need continuous, reliable energy. And solar and wind are intermittent and very expensive. This is the other thing that he lied about. He said this is the cheapest option on the market. That's absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. One of the things in California law is the utilities are required to buy a percentage of renewable energy for their retail sales. And they have to sign long-term contracts. They're required to sign long-term contracts. Why? Because these companies that are investing in solar and wind need to know that they have the long-term business in order to make that work for the investors. But how does it work for the ratepayers? You're locking in the highest possible rates for 10 years. Doesn't matter that you go 5 years later and say, look how inexpensive it is. You're stuck as a ratepayer with this 10-year contract from 5 years earlier. That's why it's so expensive. It's state law and policy making it too expensive. So saying it's the cheapest option on the market is sophistry. It's absolutely deceitful to say that. Ratepayers are getting hosed by this, and everybody can see it on their bill.
Yeah, when they say it's cheapest, it's only because it's forced because of the mandates and subsidies.
Right. The subsidies are a big part of it. So that's not good either. You shouldn't need subsidies for energy. We should be able to use what's in Bakersfield. We should be able to use oil and gas in California without importing oil on tanker trucks, which is what we do, without importing electricity from other states, which is what we do. We should be able to generate it here in California at a lower cost with all of our environmental protections. We don't have to give that up, but we have to have energy. We can't just play around and pretend we can run this state on sunshine and breezes. It doesn't work. So the other thing he said that was really false is that the wildfires are caused by climate change. As we've talked about, the wildfires are caused by land management decisions, by air quality regulations that stop the prescriptive burning that used to happen routinely. The wildfires are caused not by climate change. They're not happening everywhere else on the planet. They're only happening where the land is managed poorly, and California is managing the land poorly. And so that's one of the reasons. And managing our water resources poorly also. That's a problem. And the other thing that was a lie is he said, well, we've got all this battery power and that's going to be fabulous. We've invested in, by the way, means you're paying a ton for it, 15,000 megawatts of battery power. For perspective, that Labor Day weekend when we had rolling blackouts or nearly rolling blackouts because we had a heat wave in California, which is not uncommon in the summer, and Labor Day is still summer in California, we used about 51 or 52,000 megawatts at the peak. So on a normal day, 24 to 40, let's say 40,000 megawatts. This is 15,000 megawatts of battery power, but the trick to this is battery power lasts for 4 hours. So you can see on California's grid, you can see the measurements at CAISO.com. Today's outlook, supply, you can see the battery power. It looks just great. It'll power maybe 15% of demand at 7 p.m., at 9 p.m., but by midnight it runs out. And then what? Then we're importing electricity and we're using nuclear and we're using gas-powered plants. So what's happening is, as a ratepayer, you are paying for all of them. You're paying to keep all of these open. The gas plants, the nuclear plant, a lot of taxpayer subsidy going into keeping those open because the state has been threatening to close them. And so this is diminishing the business. It's diminishing the investment in the business. Energy companies say California is now uninvestable because of these long-term policy goals saying we're not going to allow this anymore after 2045. Well, why would you invest? How does the math pencil out for investors in building a gas-fired power plant? Even if you could get it permitted, how does that work?
Yes. And then the other thing about all this is that they, which is so outrageous, it goes back to the point about, it's cheaper. The renewables are cheaper. They don't add to renewables the cost of keeping the gas going and so on as backup.
Exactly.
So what they're doing is they're progressively shutting down the gas-fired power stations. So they're running, instead of at their peak, which they could be providing, but basically most of our energy, and we should have more of it, and nuclear, as I've argued. But they're keeping them running as a backup, which is more expensive, and that's purely because the solar and the wind doesn't work as a reliable source. But they're not paying for that. Right. So they're just free riding on that. So the whole thing is ridiculous. Another thing I just spotted here, because I use this, it's just so hilarious. The way they write these things, it's just so kind of, sophistry is exactly the word. So listen to this. This is one of many clean energy projects across the state. Roughly a quarter of new car sales are electric vehicles. California is home to the first all-electric school bus fleet in Oakland. Listen, this is the one that caught my eye. Caltrain, right? That's the train here in the Bay. I've used it many times. Go from San Francisco down to San Jose through Silicon Valley. Caltrain's rail service connecting the Bay Area, converted from diesel to electric, that's true, a key part of the state's high-speed rail vision. It's a joke. Like this is sort of trundling little commuter train. They're perfectly fine, actually. Many people, it's good. But the idea that this is something to do with high-speed rail is just laughable. And he sort of keeps talking about high-speed rail vision. It's going to connect, because the high-speed, this is eventually, the idea is that the bullet train goes from, currently it's like a little bit of the Central Valley. Was it Bakersfield to Merced? The flattest part of the whole route. And they still can't make that work at all. And haven't but eventually the idea is it goes through to the Bay Area and into LA, God, I mean, there's no plan for doing that. And then once it's in the Bay Area, which they have no clue how they're going to do or when or at what cost, then it's going to connect to this thing that he talks about, Caltrain. But the way that's written, it's just so sort of classic, shamelessly kind of manipulative, because most people reading this is a national publication who have no idea what Caltrain is or how it can. But then they do these phrases like Caltrain's rail service, a key part of the state's high-speed rail vision, as if it's total BS.
It's a key part of the state's high-speed rail con job. And here's why. Because they have promised the investors, they promised the federal government, they promised everybody who was buying these bonds, who was voting for these bonds, they promised a train from San Francisco to Los Angeles. That was the condition of the money. And so what they have done is they have invented a route. You take conventional rail from the Bay Area to Merced or Madera. You take the bullet train from Madera to Bakersfield. You take the high-speed rail bus from Bakersfield to Los Angeles, because they're not even saying there's going to be a rail of any kind there. And then that is a route. This is what they're telling the courts. This is what they're telling the investors. This is how they're getting away with it.
The thing about all this, Susan, is that they seem, despite the ridiculous, hyped up nonsense in Gavin Newsom's article and all this kind of, we're going to forge ahead and renew it and sneakily, get this all going forward to 2045. The Democrats really do understand how painful this all is for real people. And to a certain extent, they're worried about it because they're trying to do something about it, you're telling me.
Well, they've been talking all year about affordability, and this was going to be their focus, but then all they do is introduce tax increases and fee increases and hidden tax increases because they want the money. And they don't want to make things more affordable. They just want the money. But there is a proposal that was introduced in June by Democrats, SB 237. I think it was a gut and amend. It was something else when it was in the Senate. It was going to be a reduction in the price cap on fuel credits. We have this low carbon fuel standard program, which is a credit swapping program designed to make fossil fuels more expensive. And they wanted to lower the cap on the price of those credits so that it wouldn't be too much more expensive. And now in July, they took that out. So they introduced it in June. It was supposed to make everything more affordable. That particular paragraph was cut from the bill in July. And now the bill is a study of whether they could have a Western state blend of acceptable fuel that could be sold in California. So it would be like West-wide, not nationwide, but West-wide blend of fuel, because currently California has its own special blend that isn't made for anyone else, isn't sold anywhere else. And when prices go up here, when there's a refinery issue, we can't bring in gasoline from other states because it's not our special California blend. And then we have our sub-blends, winter blend, summer blend. In general, it just makes refinery operations more expensive and more complicated in California. And then the governor has come down on them with all these regulations on what their refinery inventory levels are, regulations on whether they're making excess profit, all these compliance things that they have to do to show the government what they're doing and how they're doing it. And really, it's too much for the oil companies. 2 refineries are closing, and we will lose a big chunk of the refinery capacity in California, which will push up prices. So what's the governor doing? He's looking for someone to take over one of these refineries. Good luck.
Well, that's right. Well, they would talk. I mean, this is the consequences of their own actions. And then when they see the spike in prices, and then you had these warnings that it would lead to $8 gas by the end of next year and so on. And they say, oh, please save us from the consequences of our own policies. That's really what this is about.
Yes, exactly. And because the policies are like this in California, this is why the prices here are higher than in other states, because the worldwide price of petroleum is what it is. It's these taxes, fees, and policy costs that are added on in California that are burdening the people of this state. And it's really unfortunate because it's the people that the Democrats always say they're wanting to help. People who are working, people who are in diverse communities, and they're driving to work and they're struggling in this state with the high cost of living. And these policies make life harder for them, for everyone in the state. And why? What does it accomplish? This is the thing that frustrates me. What we do for genuine air pollution, for the smog that we cleaned up, is important. But this greenhouse gas stuff accomplishes nothing. It doesn't affect the global climate. It doesn't need to happen. Ontario had a cap and trade, not Ontario, California, but Ontario in Canada, the province, had a cap and trade program and got rid of it in 2018. They said it was costing jobs. It was raising prices. It wasn't working. It was ineffective. It's gone. And they got rid of it in 2018. And we could do that in California, and we would have more jobs and lower prices.
But it's very important, just before we leave it and finish up, the smog point is very important because I noticed the other month, Gavin Newsom attacking I think it was that when the Trump administration, as we were discussing earlier, announced that it would be trying to end cap and trade, they fought back again. The press conference where they criticized it. I believe they had some slogan like "Make smog great again," right? They were trying to make out that this was going to bring back smog. That's totally dishonest because smog has nothing to do with carbon dioxide. It's things like nitrogen oxide, right? Or nitrous or nitrogen oxide. I can't remember. Other pollutants that come from vehicles, which, by the way, a lot of that has been dealt with through clean car technology. Exactly. Since we had the problems with smog in the 70s and so on.
We pay so much for trucking and for vehicles because of all this technology that we put into them. That's fine. We cleaned it up. We solved the problem. Congratulations to everybody. Job well done. That's it. No. Now we have these giant bureaucracies. They need something to do or they'll lose their jobs. And we know that never happens. So they came up with this giant regime of monitoring carbon dioxide, which is like monitoring life itself. Everything emits carbon dioxide. So now we're just taxing breathing, essentially. And everything is regulated. Everything is climate related. And what does it achieve? Nothing. And when you ask them that, when you ask a politician, what does it achieve? What they say is, well, California has to show leadership.
Leadership, that's what they always say, exactly.
But how much are the people of California supposed to pay over what other people are paying in other states? How much are we supposed to pay so Gavin Newsom can say he's a leader? I think it's a scam, and cap and trade, cap and invest, whatever they're calling it, is a hidden tax, doesn't accomplish anything, should be ended.
Yes, and a couple of points. First of all, it's not even, you're right, how much should we pay for the inverted commas leadership? But it's not even leadership because no one else is following. As you said, Ontario dropped it. I didn't know that. But there's no one else doing this. It reminds me of, I don't know if the first time I heard this remark was John Boehner, the former Speaker of the House. So I don't know if it's him or just one of those sayings. But I remember him saying, if you're a leader without any followers, you're just a guy who's out for a walk. And I just thought that was like, and that's basically what's happening here. It's just not leading anything. And then the other thing I just want to point out is that this whole regime of cap and trade and the giant bureaucracy, it's classic government bureaucracy, this incredible sprawling architecture of bureaucracy and trading and the permits, and you can pollute this and we'll measure that and you sell it to that person, and it is completely, and then they call it market driven because it's buying and selling, but it's a fake market created by the government. And of course, like anything else bureaucratic, it ends up with corruption and people who depend on it now. So there's all sorts of the beneficiaries of this, right? Yes. So the EV makers, they can get because they can sell. Exactly. Because they're not producing carbon, but they could, as it were. So they've got these permits that they sell, and it's all so complicated.
They sell certificates or permits. I believe half of Tesla's profits, not half their revenue, but half their profits comes from selling these credits to other car makers who build pickup trucks and SUVs and things that people want to buy.
It's so ridiculous. It's just fake. Yeah. And then the other aspect of it, you see it in all sorts of things. There's this whole sort of, ecosystem now of things that are dependent on these permits. I think I saw somewhere in like a dairy farm and there's some methane extracting thing that all these things may be good or bad or whatever, but they should live or die on their own merits, whether people want to pay pay for them. That's why we have markets, to make this stuff, real markets, not this kind of fake bureaucratic market. Like I've always said, if people want EVs, great, but working class people shouldn't subsidize elites to swan around in their EVs pretending they're saving the planet to make themselves feel good.
Exactly. And if something is bad and the government wants to ban it, they should ban it. They should ban it directly, and they should be accountable for that. What they're doing is they're creating government force so that it looks like the companies are making these choices themselves. And it's not government force, but it is government force. They just don't want to be accountable for it. So I think it's one of the most evil things that they call this a market-based solution. This is not a market of any kind. This is government force. And it's almost fascism, because it merges the government and industry into this knitted fabric where you eventually can't even tell what's coming from the company and what's coming from the government. But it's all coming from the government. It's government force. And if it's not accomplishing anything, it should be ended.
Exactly. There you are. Well, I've said I would. We'll see how I can and what are the sort of ways you attack it, but it needs to end. It's completely ridiculous, doesn't even achieve its own objectives, and everyone's paying the price along the way. Brilliant. Well, not everyone. Working class people in particular. That's the point.
They're hit the hardest.
Hit the hardest, exactly. Susan, thank you so much. Great to see you as always.
Thank you, Steve.
All right. Thank you, everyone. That is our show for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. I always do. And we'd love to see you again next week for the next episode of The Steve Hilton Show. Follow us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Check out Big Ideas Book Club. And please support my campaign for Governor of California. Go to stevehiltonforgovernor.com. We have some amazing new merch that you will love. Everywhere I go, people say, Steve, we love that California flag pin you wear on your jacket. Where can I get that? The answer is at stevehiltonforgovernor.com. They've just arrived. Make sure you get yours. See you soon, everyone.
Hello， 大家好啊！歡迎嚟到天下知多啲2個鐘頭嘅 video 啊！一開始所以今日都係好豐富嘅資料啦。咁今日都少咗人嚟，而家先開始有啲人嚟啊！而家有幾個一個五毛 old driver 啊！咁啊老漢推車，我唔知你識唔識聽嘅老漢推車呢個老漢嚟啊！old driver，OK。咁啊，去 send 多啲咩都好啦。I'm glad. Thank you for everyone subscribe. Appreciate it. And Joanne Reed, I think you just got here, and you absolutely right. We don't need any scam. Those train scam. It doesn't work. It doesn't work at all because California is not China. people Newsom, Jerry Brown, they try to compare the China and California. Two different countries, two different infrastructure, totally different infrastructure. That's why it doesn't work in here. So I will start speaking Cantonese, because this is the Cantonese channel, and I will have I cover a lot of topic today. At the beginning, Mel Gibson at the fire area talk about hear myself talking. Talk about the fire area. How about the Newsom and Bass, the incompetent, and then then after that, then about the agriculture. This one about the agriculture. China will not able to buy our farmland. Okay, then I start have about this book. This book has an introduction. About we got a better idea about who's Steve Hilton, who is Steve Hilton, because he's running for governor. Besides that, nobody know where he come from, what kind of philosophy, what kind of philosophy he is, and he wrote a book called California, but California is basically letting us know what's the problem. Just telling us what we're seeing every day, just telling us what are we experiencing every day. That's California, that book. But after I think I read that too. Yeah, I got that. I read that too. After I read that, I found out this is even better. This is his solution. Basically, this is Steve's solution. He knows what to do. He knows this is his experience. This is his experience and how he's going to solve the problem. So if anyone, I think anyone who are interested of supporting him, or anyone who is interested of want to learn more about him, get this book, read it yourself, and then you got a better idea. Because at the beginning when I see the populism, populism is pretty much a negative term to me. So after I read this, I got a better idea, but still not 100% sure about populism. But as he going knowing more, then probably we will like him. So I would like to, hopefully one day I can get an interview with him, ask him the question about this book, anything that he will imply and use it if he's become a governor. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my Cantonese message. 好多謝大家收睇啊！咁咧就琴日嗰條片咧就可以去到55000啊！真係我都好興奮嚇。我哋琴日就55000啦，好興奮呢個老漢推車啊，唔使理佢。咁咧開始嗰陣時咧就講呢個國家安全啦。我有提到嗰個 Peter Navarro 啊。Peter Navarro 咧，佢對中共入邊嗰個架構，中共嗰啲來龍去脈啊嗰啲嘢，全部佢好認識嘅。佢從埋一開始嗰陣時，佢都有講到《孫子兵法》啦。咁佢哋講到咧，佢哋係想用咧《孫子兵法》嗰啲招式啦嚟搞美國啊嘛。所以好彩有啊 Peter Navarro 佢就可以用翻《孫子兵法》嚟對抗翻佢咯。咁因為如果淨係中文又唔得噶嘛，如果我要識中文，其實我哋好多人識中文啦，但係要用余茂春佢哋咧要用中文，跟住佢哋嗰個英文底可能冇咁好咯。Peter Navarro 好啲咯。咁同埋咧 Peter 咧係俾 Biden 咧拉咗去坐監啊，話佢作不實證供嗰啲之類嗰啲嘢，即係總之係老屈啦，屈咗去坐監。不過好彩阿 Trump 就贏咗，就即係當然啦，pardon 咗佢出嚟啦。咁跟住仲有就介紹咗Steve Hilton。Steve Hilton 咧，我哋而家有幾個加州州候選人嘅，加州州長候選人嘅。咁Steve Hilton 係一個啦。我嗰陣時我都有去過嗰個 Sheriff Bianca 啦。Sheriff Bianca 咧就係我哋嘅Riverside 嗰邊嗰個縣警長。但係咧，我麻麻地中意佢咧，因為佢嗰陣時 BLM 嗰陣時咧，佢就跪咗。佢跪咗嘅話咧，即係佢變咗佢係都係因情形咯。咁如果佢做咗州長，我哋呢度係 super majority 嘅 assembly， 我哋 super majority 嘅super majority 嘅 Democrat， 咁佢會唔會上咗去Sacramento又係跪咧？係嘛，唔會幫我哋即係爭取我哋想要嘅嘢咧？咁做唔到 check and balance 個作用咯，喐下就跪，喐下就跪。咁而家佢冇乜答案嘅，佢而家都係講緊啲問題出嚟嘅。嗰個候選人咧，唯有咧 Steve Hilton 啦，同埋仲有一個叫做 Daniel Mercury， 佢哋係俾緊 solution 嘅，即係會點做？如果佢係點樣做，有咩方法可以做 面對我哋嘅 super majority 要點樣去處理啊？即係唔係成日日日都話俾我知你而家我日日都面對緊嗰啲 problem 啊 ？I don't need you to tell me the problem，OK？I'm facing it the problem every day 嚇。咁問題就係你點樣可以 solve the problem 嚇？So Steve Hilton 都有同 Daniel Mercury 都有 solution 嘅，但係Bianco Sheriff Bianco 咧我就唔係好覺咯我可能就嗰個要希望有一日有機會咧就個出嚟咧再傾咯嚇。當我哋咧就唔會俾即係而家好在啦。阿倉我頭先佢講到啲政策咧就係仲有佢呢個真係好識嘢㗎。佢對嗰啲政策啲 policy proposition 嗰啲所有嘢，所以我叫大家去頭先我有 post 出嚟叫佢Susan Shelley 嗰個 X 嗰度咧，佢自己有個 group 添㗎。咁佢係而家做緊記者㗎啦，咁佢啲好多都係報導翻我哋加州嘅情況嘅。咁就仲有咧就係啦，唔記得俾翻嗰個farmland地圖出嚟俾大家睇。呢個就真係Fox News 整㗎 ，Fox News 同 New York Post 整㗎咯。你睇幾近there's a fine line between okay and the later is definitely a bad thing. I see. Okay. Wow. Okay. 咁就麻煩啦。Tribalism 同 populism populism 都係好少少啲 negative。佢想 positive 佢都唔知I don't know. So I don't know. Hopefully Mel Gibson 出嚟，Hopefully Mel Gibson will run for governor. I don't know. OK 呢度咧就係而家呢啲就係嗰啲 military base 嚟㗎。OK，the military base 就係呢啲啦。OK，得幾近？紅色嗰啲咧就係 farmland 啦。我哋加州咧幾多？呢啲全部紅色 farmland，呢邊度。東岸少啲啦，多數東岸反正都少啲 farm 啦。所以咧，我哋係而家又要將呢啲全部收翻咯。你諗下，即係唔可以俾佢哋 own 咯。咁嗰陣時其實嗰陣時就係Clinton 佢哋嗰班全部都係賣國賊嚟嘅。咁今日咧個市麻麻地真係跌啦，全部 Bitcoin Crypto 呢啲全部跌翻晒落嚟啦。本來以為 Do you want the Epstein list to be released? Oh yeah, it's coming, it's coming. Epstein list is coming, it's coming. Trump say it's coming too. Trump didn't stop people from releasing the Epstein list. So are you interested of seeing what's in the burn bag 係咪打啊？問翻去轉頭嘛。Are you interested of seeing what's in the burn bag? Do you know what's a burn bag? Are you interested in seeing what's in the burn bag? I want to see everything in the burn bag. Woody, do you know what's in the burn bag? Left? 屌係老味，全部都係咁樣，入嚟噏兩句走撚咗去。走撚咗Thank you for comment. Thank you for your comment 咁我哋而家睇下，即係會一路而家就開始準備做呢啲咯Oh no. 係嘛？咁戇居嘅。跟住DNC won't have to spend billions for 卡梅拉啦。common sense 嚟啫嘛，而家 Are you changing the subject? Because it's the stupid subject 啊嘛，係嘛 ？stupid subject。relevant 係咪咁長咩 relevant？睇下先。TTS 係嘛？好啊！哇19喎懟咗佢先，睇下懟佢懟老味跟住咧，其實仲有啲嘢，仲有一個咧，仲緊要嘅就係咧，除咗呢個啦。OK， 而家咧啟動緊國際刑事法院咧，佢對香港侵犯人權嗰班官咧，去進行調查。呢個咩意思咧？呢個就係咧，你知香港好多有 BNO 嘅就可以自動去咗英國噶啦。咁以前咧嗰段有2019年嗰段時間咧，好多咧就有 BNO， 跟住咧就去恰啲人侵犯咗人權嘅嗰班，跟住之後咧佢喺退咗休啦，咁啊走咗去英國。OK， 咁所以咧而家咧就聯署緊，希望咧英國政府即係少少渺茫啦 ，work 唔 work 又唔知啦，少少渺茫，但係就希望英國政府咧可以去即係去睇下，即係睇下啲 case 咯。咁如果係可能，即係佢都有權可以將嗰個人將嗰個即係咁講嘅寫就寫唔到出嚟啦，但可以佢將個撲街取消咗個撲街個 BNO 咁解咯，就係就而家希望可以有呢樣嘢。咁咧簽名其實 change.org 就其實都唔係冇乜即係冇乜即係叫做權力㗎啦。但係如果嗰個數字夠高啊，就可能希望咧就可以有呢種可以起到一啲壓力俾英國政府咯。而家唔知㗎，我哋係唔知有人問，有冇用㗎？咁我都唔知有冇用㗎。咁啲人都會問有冇用啊？唔知有冇用，但係咧有時啲嘢咧，即係喐揾有教㗎嘛。一啲功能性思考，有啲叫做結構性思考。我哋喺呢兩個思考裏邊就要 shuffle 咯，兩邊 shuffle。咁而家問題就係我哋可唔可以俾到，即係個目的啊，就係俾到壓力俾英國政府。咁英國政府用呢種方法係嘛？會唔會係一個比較即係 正路啲嘅方法咯，叫做咁啊，就希望可以簽，我就簽咗咯，我就反正我都唔知有冇用嘅。但係咧，同埋有一樣嘢咧，就係有時咧係幫班手足咧，可以或者喺個情緒上啊，有時有啲嘢我即係譬如有啲嘢唔 work 噶啦，但係如果譬如話喺情緒上咧，佢哋即係做咗呢樣嘢，佢哋情緒上可以感覺到舒服翻啲咧，我都覺得值得去做嘅，因為咧好多我哋叫做 PTSD 啊嘛呢度嚇 PTSD， 咁佢個 PTSD 佢哋而家好多都有面對緊嘅，好多手足都面對緊，咁好多手足佢哋有時即係呢啲佢哋又唔中意話即係公開啦。但係我自己就觀察到啦，邊啲有邊啲冇咯，邊啲可能係有嘅，邊啲可能係唔係個個有嘅咁有啲有得比較嚴重啲嘅，同埋因為最主要係因為翻唔到去啊嘛。咁有時咧就佢哋嗰個心情咧係要去緩解咯。咁我又忙啦，我又唔係有錢，有時真係都唔知點樣幫到佢哋啊。如果可以真係可以幫到佢哋，即係幫到咪幫咯，就係喺能力範圍內幫到幫。所以我嗰陣時咧，我幾中意呢個教會嘅。我而家去緊個信義會生命堂，因為呢個牧師師母咧喺即係照顧啲手足啦，咁叫做嚇。有時就係教會有個地方俾啲手足去聚下腳啊，咁我覺得就已經好大嘅幫忙。問題就係仲即係唔好講問題係咩啦嚇。總之咧就即係我哋同埋一班唔係細路仔啊，比較大啲嘅，佢哋有嗰個自尊心啊，或者有即係正常嘅一面啦，咁叫做又唔係有一班咧就因為好中意即係搲爛塊面嘅，有一班咧就好努力咁自己搞得掂自己搞嘅嗰啲咧，咁但係好多就亦都唔了解佢哋個心理狀況咯。咁其實仲有一樣嘢咧，而家咧阿 Trump 之後咧嗰個醫療保險咧就冇咗嘅，好多因為淨係公民先有綠卡先有，好似阿西林嗰啲好似冇啊。咁我都唔係好清楚，好似係冇啦。咁咧其實有一班其實應該有一班揾到錢嘅，就應該咧組織起嚟咧就做個基金。美國呢度搞個基金，就係專幫呢班手足買保險，即係好似唔使咩啫嘛，當借俾手足買保險，啲手足做到咁上下，即係啱仲未穩定，經濟未穩定就買唔到保險，但係到買到保險咪還翻。係嘛？還翻啲錢去嗰個基金度咯。咁變咗個基金永遠都有錢喺入邊可以運作，做一啲需要嘅嘢咯。咁呢啲我唔識做嘅，所以我唔會做。但係我覺得 idea 係要有需要一啲人識做嗰啲人去做呢樣嘢咯。我唔識做，你要我做功課，因為基金呢啲運作啊，呢啲咁嘅 non-profit organisation 啊，咁。同埋啲一有錢銀瓜葛嗰啲真係好麻煩嘅人性啲人性弱點就出晒嚟㗎啦，咁樣一有錢銀喺入邊，所以呢個又係一個難度非常之高嘅嘢嚟嘅。咁即係唔知啦，所以有時我覺得信咗耶穌有道好嘅，即係你唔好你。起碼有個精神寄託咯，有啲嘢你可以咁你話咁我唔去信耶穌，我去拜黃大仙咯。咁但係問題就係你去拜黃大仙嗰個精神寄託，除非你你個知識經驗同邏輯都冇咯。當你有知識經驗同邏輯嗰陣時咧，你就唔覺得拜黃大仙係 make sense 㗎啦嘛。即係冇邏輯㗎嘛嗰樣嘢。我哋做每樣嘢都係鬱文教琴日學嘅。 以前佢都有，佢話成日以前有講過，啲以前都一路睇佢節目都未講過呢樣嘢嚇。6個字嚇，知識、經驗同埋邏輯嚇。咁啊，所以咧，如果佢心情唔好啊，咁你要用，咁梗係祈禱嚇，梗係同上帝講啦。咁走去拜黃大仙就冇咗邏輯嗰 part 啊嘛，因為黃大仙都有移民啦，係嘛？即係你知道嗰樣嘢，嗰個黃大仙呢個係流噶嘛，佢只係一個醫師嚇，跟住俾人封去做神仙咁樣嗰啲咧，封神榜啲道教嗰啲啊，係嘛？即係封神榜都唔 make sense 嘅其實。咁啊，基督教其實係最 make sense 嗰個嚟㗎啦，係有啲人覺得唔 make sense 咯，咁我唔知啦嚇。有啲常識嚇，有啲嘢你覺得係常識，人哋又覺得係唔識嚇，咁啊唯有好難講，好似咁多 TDS 喺度，我哋都冇辦法㗎，係嘛？咁啊，因為 Epstein file 你講出嚟係嘛？屌你老尾就係 Elon Musk 啦，黃眼鳩鳩咁吹撚埋咁濕鳩嘢，戇鳩嚇！屌而家要喐佢啊，早就喐咗啦，民主黨咁簡單啊！而家啲民主黨喺度，我要睇，咪屌你，咪睇撚到夠咯。但係入邊有啲好 sensitive 嘅嗰啲人啊，啲人名嗰啲啊，嗰啲可能要即係其實係驚，因為點解咧？佢入邊 involve 咗咧，就好多第二啲人。阿 Trump 咧就一定要，亦有啲人都要保護咯，係嘛？咁佢可能係咁啩，我就唔知啊。咁肯定阿 Trump 咧就唔喺入邊嘅，肯定阿 Trump 係冇份嘅。點解？如果肯定阿 Trump 有份咧，你民主黨只會嘥咁多錢恐賀錦麗都要輸啊，大佬！用屎忽諗下都得啦，嗰啲 stupid TDS 冇辦法㗎，反坐咗3芒個嚇，即係屌老味嘥鳩個時間。不過唔緊要，你叫多啲人入嚟打字就得㗎啦，屌係嘛？你叫多人入嚟打字嚇。Thank you for your comment，OK？係嘛？Keep commenting，come on，keep comment。Keep subscribe， I need subscribe, comment, subscribe 係嘛？就係咁啫嘛嚇。咁多謝大家收睇。咁我今日應該冇琴日嘅成績咁好啦。咁日都係咁噶啦，就唔會日日個成績都咁好嘅。日日成績咁好咧，就冇人做第啲啦，個個做 YouTuber 啦，係咪？好 ，thank you very much， 多謝大家收睇啦。我應該冇漏嘢啦，講晒啦嚇。已經12點準時收工啊！下次再見，拜拜。